but these these workshops are, and Sean, feel free at any moment to step in and tell me, no, you're saying something stupid about these workshops. But from my understanding right now, these are pretty much in the prototype phase, and we're
Mhm.
working out the kinks of how we want these to go. My understanding, and at least for me, if I'm going to be hosting these infrastructure workshops, my intention is I would like some collaboration with everybody that's in here, whether you have some experience, no experience, and you're a fucking master. It doesn't matter. I want I would like, as we convene on Mondays here, and throughout the week, if you get an hour even to go in and look at something to be able to bring back to the workshop for the following week that you can share with everybody would be a huge benefit to this entire process.
Mhm.
So, with that being said, I'm going to start this workshop off actually not talking about anything crypto or blockchain related for a specific reason, and Sean might actually appreciate this a little bit. It's something that I push whenever I'm in. I am an instructor. Again, a quick introduction of myself for those that don't know me. Courage. Also go by my first name is Keith. Feel free to call me by my first name. I'm cool with that. I am an instructor. I'm a teacher. I teach nuclear operations instruction to engineers, technicians, so on and so forth. So I go around and I do this quite a bit, and working with a whole range of individuals. And I have a love of sharing knowledge. Right. That's one of my big reasons that I'm really excited about this group. About Zero X Alpha, I think that there's a lot of good things that are gonna come from this, and being able to share our different levels of expertise and sharing our knowledge across the board. So one of the things that I push is what's called it's a combination of three different fields actually. It's the field itself is relatively new. The science was just recognized, I think, within the past decade, so it's relatively new. It's called mind brain education. And I like this idea of combining fields. And the same reason that I'm so interested in blockchain technology, right? It's a combination of sociology, computer science, game theory, all these different fields that come together in blockchain. Mind brain education is another one of those type of fields. It's kind of a conglomeration of three different fields specifically, which is psychology, teaching, and neuroscience. And basically, what because there's these three fields that all work at looking at maybe how the mind works, how it functions, how we learn, and we there was never really a good communication between those three fields in the past until this mind brain education came about. And what they've done is they've effectively standardized the communication between the three fields into this single field, and they are looking at, again, how do we learn as individuals? Because I mean, I and nobody has to necessarily answer this. It's kind of a rhetorical question, or you can just answer it to yourself and think, when was the last time? I mean, all of us have been to either high school or in college, some type of education background, but when was the last time any of those education locations have given us a class on how to learn, right? We take it for granted, and we all say, "Oh, well, we have our own learning techniques. I'm a kinesthetic learner. I'm an audible learner. I'm a visual learner, whatever." Those are actually kind of lumped in, and the mind brain education field covers it in what's called neuromyths, to where it's not really true. We all kind of learn the same way, whether you want to believe it or not. It's The big aspect of it is really just attention, and are you able to pay attention? And if you do pay attention, you're able to learn. But what they've boiled it down to is there's really six learning techniques that have been proven to be extremely effective, and I highly recommend anytime you guys are going in. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the purpose of these workshops is to learn, right? We want to be able to spread this information. We want to be able to learn it for ourselves. And I'm up here doing this in front of you guys to be able to teach this to you guys. So you guys are picking up something as well. So it comes down to they've six different techniques that they let's see here, that they've boiled this down into. And again, I'll and where's the bullets at? There we are. So I just want to share these with you guys. I highly encourage anytime that if you're doing your own reading, doing your own research, which is, I mean, if you haven't seen DYOR and you're in this space, you're not, I don't know what you're doing. Everybody says that, right? So whenever you're doing your own research, I mean, you have to be learning something, right? We live in this age of Google where it's so easy to just Google for everything, but I am a proponent that there has to be some base level of knowledge that you carry forward. I have to know how to perform basic arithmetic functions before I can start implementing more advanced arithmetic functions and being able to apply them as well. So the same goes with any type of field. Like I have to know the basic knowledge or the basic lingo, the basic vocabulary with anything that goes with the blockchain space specifically. So one of these things is what's is space repetition. So I can't spell. So as I'm going over these, I hope they sound very intuitive because for the most part, a lot of you guys probably already do these things, but you really never either put a lot of emphasis on it or really thought about that these are the main techniques that are used. So when I say spaced repetition, what that means is say you're reading as you go through and you're reading a topic. Well, later on, maybe an hour later, think to yourself, okay, well, either reread the topic. Reading's not really the best method to do it, but try to recall that information yourself at a later date and continue to repeat that over and over again. And again, I know that sounds silly, but it's really when you put a conscious effort into it and recognize, okay, well, I don't know. So I read what a layer two is, but do I really know what that means? Can I explain it to somebody else? Well, give yourself some spaced repetition on it. And as you read through and you're again doing your own basic studies of what a layer two is, well, then later on, go back and look at that information again, be able to try to recall that information again. And you can tie that into this next technique, which it's called interleaving. Interleaving is the idea of instead of whenever you're doing this spaced repetition or you're doing your studying, again, you can apply this to anything, instead of always say you have a list of things that you're studying. And again, maybe this list of mind brain education techniques. And when you're looking at them, instead of studying them in the same order every time and going A, B, C, D, E, go A, E, B, E, A, C, whatever. Do a random order. Make a simple random number generator if you like doing stuff like that, and just set up a random order of shit to be able to go through and look at it. Instead of that way, you're learning not by association with the order of it, but actual but by the concepts themselves. So something to keep in mind as you're going through these things. If you're looking at something, studying something, try not to do it in the same order every time. Which then let's go into the next idea is elaboration. Anybody hasn't heard of somebody say, "Hey, can you elaborate on that?" Again, I'd be surprised. And when I say elaboration, when you learn a concept, try to be able to explain it in as much detail as you're able to. And I use this in class all the time when I'm teaching. If I ask a question and a student gives me an answer, I try to generally say, "Hey, can you elaborate on that?" And I go over this stuff at the beginning, and what I want them to tell me is, give me as much information on that as you can, because that exercises your brain on that specific subject to be able to not only be able to spout out a keyword tricky phrase, but also be able to understand what the context of that is. So the next is concrete examples. Concrete examples, again, are being able to describe something in a way that is more relatable, perhaps to you or to other people. So if I'm going to explain a concept of blockchain technology, maybe I'll relate it to something that's a little bit less abstract. Computer science is notorious for this. There's so much abstraction that goes into it that you have to, if you want to wrap your mind around it, you kind of have to create your own concrete examples. So whenever you're reading something, and I know this takes time, but when you're looking at something and you're reading it, try to really visualize and again cement that idea, come up with that concrete example in your mind of what can you relate that to that makes more sense. Next is dual coding, which kind of goes into concrete examples a little bit, but what that is being able to effectively describe things in multiple the same thing in multiple ways. Maybe being able to not only describe it in words, but also be able to maybe draw a picture illustrating that idea. And you see this a lot in maybe white papers or scholarly articles and peer-reviewed articles, to where they will have a concept and then they'll be able to. This needs to go away. That they will also have a drawing or a diagram being able to describe that concept in a little bit more of in a visual manner. So that's the idea of dual coding. So trying to be able to do that yourself again helps cement that information in your mind. And the last one is, I'm not even going to say arguably, it is definitively the best method of being able to retain information, which is retrieval practice. Retrieval practice is effective. It is the testing effect. So being able to, you don't have the book in front of you, but being able to recall that information yourself and explain that in an accurate manner. Again, this is the number one way to learn, and there's a reason. Not only we don't only take tests because we're able to illustrate our knowledge, but we also take it. It's also a learning experience. You learn a lot when you take exams. When I'm in front of you guys, when I'm teaching, if I'm leading these workshops, I have to retrieve a lot of information myself, and that helps me as well learn that information, which is another reason that I kind of want a little bit more of a collaboration in these things. Because, well, rather than just reading off of something and going through it and maybe death by PowerPoint, like I was doing with those with the presentations that I was doing before, having a little bit more interaction and having everybody get a little bit more retrieval practice is going to get. Not only is it going to cement this information in your mind a little bit more, but it's also just a little bit more interesting. So I'll get off my high horse on the mind brain education, but I felt like that was a good thing to share with you guys. I highly recommend people use it. Paying more attention, giving yourself a um, the opportunity to pay attention to how you're reading, how you're doing your own research. I did a presentation it was almost a month ago now, on finding new projects, right? Finding those gems. And when you're doing your own research, you're reading those white papers. Well, as you're doing that and you're reading and you're providing and you actually um, are learning along the way, right? You're looking and you're going through and you say, okay, well, I don't know what this term means. Well, go ahead and look it up and then try to remember what that term is. Like for me today, or yesterday, whenever I was looking at stuff for this workshop, one of the things that I was looking at was cross domain MEVs, for example. MEVs being the maximal extractable value. And we'll talk about this. I will give a little bit more explanation on it, which is covered actually, because I want to talk about Vitalik's endgame a little bit today as well. But that's one of the concepts that I remember. I actually kind of gave myself some spaced repetition on it and some retrieval practice, so that I have that term down. So now if I come across it when I'm doing research, I don't have to take the extra 5-10 minutes to go and Google it and search it up anymore. So it's more efficient. Now you're more efficient. Now you're looking at things and you're able to read through them and they make more sense. It can be painful and it's a long process, but in the end, knowledge is power. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're all here for, and being able to have that knowledge and building that foundation so that you can read and look at new projects, understand the lingo, understand the vocabulary, and be able to apply it and understand what's a good project and what's a bad one it is invaluable. So, all right, I'll go ahead and stop with that. Any questions on any of that?
I think maybe afterwards, because I can't stay for this entire thing, but I'd like to just get some suggested reading or books on that, because I definitely need help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, there's a couple of them that I can give right now. One
Yeah.
is Make It Stick. I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head right now. Apparently, my retrieval practice is a little low lately. But yeah, Make It Stick. And then there's another one that's called Thinking Fast and Slow. That one's by Dan Kahneman. and both of those are fantastic. Dan Kahneman goes over basically effectively how our mind works, and whenever you have the well, I won't go too much into it for the sake of brevity and keeping so we can actually start looking at projects and talk about infrastructure. But yeah, I would say those are two really good ones. Make It Stick is a little bit more um, approachable. Dan Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow is a little bit more advanced, and it's not a quick read. It's something that you'll read through a chapter and kind of reflect on it.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So with that said, like I said, I want this to be a little bit interactive, and also so pulling from you guys, I'll share what I have. Um, we did this a little bit with the DeFi workshop last week. I don't have that sweet flow chart that Shine was producing, but a Google Doc works just as well. I'll also share this link out for you guys. So, all right, so we're coming in here and we're talking. Damn, I'm sorry. We're 30 minutes in. We're just now starting to talk about infrastructure. But when we start talking about this, well, I mean, the key idea is right. What is infrastructure, right? When I say an infrastructure project, I know that sounds like such a basic concept, but hey, maybe somebody's coming in here and you're like, that sounds cool. I understand infrastructures like roads and bridges and stuff in the physical world, and but well, what about in virtual space? Well, when we're talking about blockchain technology, what is an infrastructure project? Well, those are going to be the projects that are laying the groundwork effectively for everything else to build off of. Now, I find this I love this area. I love the idea. I love the infrastructure projects because really it goes into everything else, right? There are infrastructure projects for DeFi. There's infrastructure projects for the metaverse and gaming. There's going to be infrastructure projects as we start expanding out and we start looking at what uh, as we start expanding into other realms of the traditional markets, like again the healthcare field, government, whatever it may be. As blockchain starts expanding out, you're going to have infrastructure that needs to be laid for those as well. So when we say infrastructure, what is infrastructure? That is effectively the uh, projects, and I'm just putting this in my own layman's terms here, that are laying the groundwork. They're the foundation for other projects to build on and expand. So that's my definition that I'm going to use. If anybody want to add to that, I'll take a 5 second silence as a no. All right. So then we got to ask ourselves, well, okay, well, why is that important? Pretty much exactly what I just said, right? Like it's reaching into everything else. So we're going to be doing these metaverse, we're going to be doing these DeFi mining workshops, everything else. Well, infrastructure, and I have to be careful to not dive too much into what they want to cover, but I mean, it's the nature of the beast, right? It covers everything, and a lot of the major projects. I'm going to throw it like Ethereum into there. That Ethereum it is an infrastructure project in that sense. It is something that has laid the groundwork for other projects to be built on top of. Granted, it's again one of the top crypto, one of the top projects, but it doesn't save it from the space. Um, so we'll go into some of the other projects here in a minute. But I guess we'll start with some basic information here. And since we bring up Ethereum, one of the big issues with Ethereum is obviously this idea of the blockchain trilemma, which if you've been in the space, you may have heard of it. I'm sure you've heard of it. If you haven't, the blockchain trilemma is basically just the idea of that whenever you have a decentralized storage or decentralized protocol, you there are three aspects of it, and you can only have two out of three of these aspects. So that is going to be security, scalability, and decentralization. Obviously, the two top, Bitcoin and Ethereum, they you have to make a trade off. So the trade off for them was scalability. They chose to focus on decentralization and uh, um, security. So So with that said, I mean that comes from that actually came from back in the '80s, right? There was it was a computer science, uh, the consistency, availability, and partition tolerance, the CAP theorem, that basically just said that yeah, any decentralized storage it can only satisfy two out of those three items. So if you're interested where that came from, that's the CAP theorem. I can't spell for shit. Is that right? Yeah, it looks right. So with that said, again, we have Ethereum that has sacrificed on something like scalability. Well, a lot of these, so now a big push obviously is being able to scale out these other major blockchains that haven't done that. Like we talked about Solana, for example, that has sacrificed on decentralization, and they're highly scalable and they're secure, but they're centralized, right? Um, Vitalik actually talked about it. He was in the Bankless podcast not long ago, and he talked about, well, maybe they could fix that later on if they chose to. But again, this really depends on those communities themselves and if they really value central decentralization that much, which to me is a really interesting idea anyway. Because I mean, what's the whole point of blockchain technology and doing all this if we're just going to make it centralized? Well, how is it any different than than what we have now? So I think the decentralization is definitely key. So we're looking at how do we scale these things out. So with that said, we have different layers that are used in different. Well, actually, let's back up a little bit. Ethereum, there's different scaling techniques that are used. You can have things like side chains. So let's look at Ethereum scaling. You can have things like a side chain, plasma chains. Sharding is a scaling solution. You have state channels, and then you have rollups. And these all actually kind of break down a little bit as well. Um, the state channels can be broken down into I think that that's just state channels and uh, financial channels is maybe the word for it. I'll have to look again to be sure on that. And then roll-ups right now they can be broken up into optimistic roll-ups and ZK roll-ups or zero knowledge roll-ups. So, and that's actually something that's pretty big if we're looking at infrastructure and we're looking at scalability. A big buzzword right now is ZK roll-ups. That's the next big thing. Well, yes and no. I think this is my personal opinion. I think that both have their use cases. I think both are going to be important going forward, and I do not think that ZK rollups are going to overtake and make optimistic rollups completely obsolete. Um, Not to mention, and maybe I'm just being a little bit biased just because optimistic roll. I mean, ZK rollups right now they're still kind of experimental. They're not fully functional. You got uh, Starkware that's setting up ZK rollups. Can look at other projects as well. If anybody knows any off the top of your head, I'm sure there's plenty that we can list. Loopring's using ZK rollups as well. So with that said, so we have these different Ethereum scaling solutions that are being brought into the mix, and that's kind of what Vitalik was talking about recently in his Endgame article that he wrote, and I recommend anybody to go ahead and take and read it. It's seriously maybe a 10-minute read. Granted that if we look at some of these, if we're going to talk about some of these MBE techniques and bringing it into that, there's going to be some. If you're not super tech savvy, if you don't have a good computer science background, you may have to go ahead and do some googling on some of the terms that he uses. That's what I was talking about, like cross-domain MEVs. Whenever he was talking about that in his Endgame article, which I didn't know what that was, but I did a little bit of reading. There's a Cornell article about it that's pretty interesting. I can recommend that as well, but that's a little bit more in depth and probably not completely necessary. So when we're looking at some of these things, it's good to get that concept of what's going on, but you can still have some black box in there as well to where, okay, I don't need to know exactly how this method is being called and what it's being used for and what this function does and all the different things that I can put into it. That's probably getting, unless you're actually being a developer, probably a little bit out of scope. So just being aware of that. So since we're up to this point, that this is the direction that I kind of want to go with this workshop. Is we'll start with, because there's so many ways that we can go with infrastructure. If there is a specific area, if there's a specific project that you guys want to look at, my person. So the four that I'm really interested in are Cosmos, Polkadot, Chainlink, and Layer Zero. These are four projects that I think are super interesting, especially what they're looking at coming out with in the future. Specifically, obviously, Polkadot with its parachains are now out. You have the parachain auctions and such. Chainlink with its its cross-chain interoperability protocol. If any of you guys were in my interoperability and bridges presentation that I did last month as well, it's another area that I'm really interested in. So Chainlink and their CCIP is huge. Layer Zero, same thing. It's just a different approach to interoperability, and I think that a lot of these have space in. I don't think it's a zero sum game for a lot of these interoperability projects. So something else to be aware of. Layer Zero is still relatively new. There's not a whole lot. There's actually no coin associated with Layer Zero. So if you're looking at investing, not really available with something like Arbitrum or Optimism. It's a great idea. I mean, these are great. Like, I'll go ahead and add those to the list just because they're awesome. They don't have any coins associated with them, but they're highly speculated that Arbitrum and Optimism are both probably going to get a coin this year. Layer Zero, looking at their model, they are going to be using a Oracle and a Relayer nodes set up to be able to communicate between two chains, and they have to have a coin for that. I don't see it being possible because there has to be some type of incentive mechanism that they're going to put in for people to set up these relay and uh, Oracle nodes for the system to operate. But
Courage.
overall, yes, absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good, man.
Have you looked into fuck, I just forgot the name of it. Cellframe, the Cellframe network.
Cellframe. I have not looked into Cellframe.
It's another interoperability project.
Like cell, like that.
Cellframe, like FRAME. Yeah.
Okay.
It's another interoperability project. It's essentially sort of a similar architecture to Polkadot, except it's built on Rust and it's quantum resistant.
Interesting. So quantum stuff that, and I've touched on it a little bit. If any of you guys have heard me talk before, I'm really interested in quantum computing and its eventual and inevitable rise, and what it's going to change, not only just blockchain. I mean, just the entire engineering spectrum, the entire art, everything that we do in the world is going to be radically shifted whenever quantum computing is hitting these engineering spaces specifically. Because to be honest, you're not going to have a quantum computer as your personal computer sitting in your home anytime soon. Like, we're talking like several decades, in my opinion. Like, that's not happening anytime soon. Now, if we're talking about things like big engineering and experimental and R&D type spaces that have these massive budgets that could build these out, that's something I see happening a little bit sooner than that. My personal opinion, looking from what I'm looking at, I would say about a decade. And with that being said, that's going to change. I mean, all this, what we're talking about with infrastructure, I mean, it's going to change how energy is produced. It's going to change how energy is transferred. It's going to change how everything that we do. I mean, there's so much that we can talk about with it, and I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But yeah, that is really interesting. I don't think that it's something that we should be concerned about too much with any like Ethereum or something like a quantum computer coming out and hacking the Ethereum network and breaking its cryptographic sequence. I don't think that's going to be an issue because, well, we can shift it to make it quantum resistant pretty easily. It's actually not as difficult as it sounds. It's just basically expanding out the cryptographic sequence more. So, but yeah, that is good to know. I'll add that. That's definitely a good one to add to the list. Thank you.
All good, no problem, brother.
Shine is rolling out. Yep. So for let's see, what else did I want to go into here? With that said, like I said, Vitalik's endgame, what he was kind of going into is what's this space going to look like as we continue 5-10 years into the future, and these protocols continue to expand out. We get new scaling solutions. We have these new roll-ups, these new interoperability protocols that are coming in, and this multi-chain future. And how's that actually going to look? And how do we prepare for that? And his argument effectively is that Ethereum is positioned really well to be able to handle what he sees as the inevitable future of there's going to be some centralization that's going to occur with like block production, for example. He because you're going to have major players and the block producers. A good block producer on let me rephrase that. What makes a good block producer on Arbitrum is the same qualities that makes a good block producer on Optimism, is what makes a good block producer arguably on Ethereum and all these other chains. So if they're already doing that for these other chains, what's going to happen is it's going to start getting centralized down to a select few, effectively, that are just really good at doing this. So, but there's ways to combat that, and being able to decentralize the validation that occurs for those, and which is already occurring, but being able to make sure that we decentralize the validation that occurs as we have different roll-ups that are happening. And again, we have Arbitrum, Optimism, all these other protocols that are expanding out. Well, then you're going to have, and that's what comes in with that cross-domain MEV, the maximum extractable value, to where you have something like you'll have basically coordination between those roll-ups to be able to coordinate the block production on each one of those, which could cause issues. Well, that's something that, again, he goes into the article about how we can look at avoiding that. So the reason that I bring that up is because Vitalik, he is the expert on Ethereum, obviously, right? I mean, so if this is the direction he sees it going, well, we should be looking at protocols that are trying to fit into that end game vision as well, and paying attention to the space to see how it goes. So, with that said, I've now been talking for about 30 minutes, so I want to open this up a little bit more to everybody else here in the workshop. So, let's start with, are there any projects? So I have some of these listed here. These are scaling and interoperability infrastructure projects. That is, again, not a all-inclusive list, and we can also start going into, like, again, DeFi or Metaverse if people are interested in that direction. But the idea here is to dive in and really understand what is the future of infrastructure, what direction do we see it going, and what are the projects. And again, we're here to make money as well, so what are good projects to invest in? So does anybody have any input on that? Has anybody done any? Does anybody have any questions on infrastructure and what it is, maybe, and so you can get a little bit better understanding of what direction to look? And do not feel you're in a safe space. Don't feel like, oh, this is a dumb question. No, that's no dumb questions.
I guess to make it less awkward, I'll say something. what type of products exactly are you looking for? Like things like decentralized exchanges, oracles, like anything, I guess, to help build out like a financial blockchain, I'm assuming?
Again, infrastructure. It makes it a little bit more difficult for these. So it as a group, the idea is that we're all kind of working together, right? We're working together to take this in a direction. We can take it in any direction we choose. These are some of the ones that I was looking at. Again, if people are like, oh, I don't
Interoperability
really care about it,
focused.
then again, I'm interested in interoperability and laying the foundation for that, which is why I've been looking a lot into Layer Zero. Again, CCIP on Chainlink. Polkadot obviously it is a interoperability. It's a layer
Yeah,
zero
it
that
has the
allows
parachains and everything, and same
exactly.
with Kusama. Could you CCIP? Could you just define that real quick on Chainlink? You said I've
Yeah,
never heard of that.
yeah. So Chainlink, it should be coming out this year, I believe. It's Chainlink's. Drop this down. So there's CCIP. CCIP is it stands for Cross Chain Interoperability Protocol.
So Chainlink could essentially migrate from one chain to another with its smart contract functionality.
Not so. Chainlink's interesting, right? Because Chainlink's not really. It's not really
It's
a
an
traditional
oracle.
blockchain. Yeah, yeah. It's a Oracle network, right? So for those that aren't familiar with Chainlink, let's go ahead and just dive real quick into that. What Chainlink does is it's a Oracle network that. So you have the node operators that set up. Maybe they're monitoring. It could be anything from like temperature or maybe what the price of rice is in a specific area, whatever. It doesn't matter. Some type
It
of
brings real world data to smart contracts that it's required
yes,
for the
yes,
agreement.
exactly. So you have these node operators that are set up these oracles to be able to gather that real world information and be able to put it into for whatever. If somebody wants to create a smart contract, a blockchain, whatever, a DApp that uses this information, they can then use Chainlink and call that information anytime they need to, so they have a constant feed of that data, which is huge, right? I mean, this is bringing a lot more real world application into
It
the
essentially
blockchain.
replaces any sort of middleman.
Yes, exactly, and it's a great network. Again, if you haven't, I highly recommend doing a little bit more looking into it. If you guys are interested, I can talk a lot. We can start going more into that into a later workshop as
Have
well.
you heard of Orachain?
Uh, Aura chain like that.
ORAI think. Orachain.
OR.
Um, I haven't looked into it too much. I think Damien's heard of it.
Okay.
Uh, I think it's like it's some sort of AI oracle. It's like an incredibly advanced type of oracle, like the first of its type. Yeah, it seems I haven't done too much digging on it, but it seems quite interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, so that's a good thing that I'll do some digging on for especially for next week as we come into this. Because yeah, so and that's great. So yeah, as we continue into this workshop, the idea is to all right. So look at some of these projects and let's dive into them. Let's really understand them. Let's look at what they're going to be doing for the space. Let's look at what upcoming developments they have. So just back to your original question, what is the CCIP? It's going to be using the Oracle. It's basically Chainlink's already set up across a massive amount of different blockchains, right? It already has its Oracle node set up on all these different blockchains. Well, it's going to leverage that all those nodes that it has set up and allow for like general message transmission between one chain to another. So if like say for example that you want to uh, seamlessly conduct a transaction on BSC, maybe have it say like a DEX swap on BSC and Arbitrum. Well, using the CCIP, you will be able to set up a DApp that will be able to gather that information from both, conduct that transaction in one location rather than having to like do a swap, do a bridge, go back over to
Yeah,
the
it makes it like a lot more seamless. It basically just uses the price feed or whatever it needs from both chains seamlessly, right?
Correct.
That's very interesting. That's pretty
It is.
freaking damn cool.
It is, and Layer Zero is another one that's actually doing that. They have a similar. If anybody hasn't looked at Layer Zero, they actually have a YouTube video up that they're on testnet right now. They're not on mainnet yet, but really just illustrates their ability to be able to, like, say if somebody wanted to use, because Layer Zero, they are a Layer Zero. So what that means is they are more on the data transmission layer rather than the information transmission of information, which is the layer zero, rather than a layer one or a layer two. So layer zero, they've set up what's called a ultra light client on that. That's what they've developed, and they have their own APIs and software developer kits so that these other protocols can sit, like, you can a DApp, similar idea that I can set up a DApp and use their Oracle and Relayer configuration on their ultralight clients on those two chains to be able to communicate between the two. Stellar Network, again, full disclosure, I'm actually an admin for their group. They have another one. They actually just came out with it. Their interchain messaging framework. It's the same idea as the CCIP for being able for developers effectively to use this SDK to be able to, or software developer kit to be able to create these multi-chain native DApps. So Layer Zero, Chainlink, Cosmos is another one that allows you can use their what the hell is it? Tendermint to be able to create using Tendermint and their
Internet of blockchains.
I'm sorry.
The Internet of blockchains.
Yeah, and that's really what all of these are really going for, is this Internet of blockchains. Cosmos, Chainlink, TCP kind of, but yeah, Layer Zero, Cosmos, and Stellar Network with their interchain messaging framework, all looking at that similar idea of the Internet of blockchains. Absolutely. So yeah, so definitely Cellframe and Orchain. I'm gonna definitely take a look at those. Anybody else? I don't know if there's anything else you want to know with those, or if we want to look more into those. All right. Anybody else? Any other thoughts there?
I'm not sure if you're quite familiar with Constellation Network.
Constellation. I can't spell for sure.
Yeah, ticker symbol is DAG.
There we go.
I heard about them. I saw them. I saw someone on Twitter tweet about them. I haven't looked into them either, but I've heard that they're. I don't know, they got something cool brewing up in the background.
Constellation Network does.
Apparently, like from I don't know, from what I've heard people tweet about it, it's supposed to be pretty cool. Constellation, yeah, it's DAG, DAG.
Constellation
they
or
have,
Constellation?
And the ticker's DAG, yeah. Yeah.
They got a contract with the U.S. government right now, and I think Damon talked about it. Talked about one of their protocols that they're building on top of the Constellation Network called LTX. That's gonna be big as well. Essentially, LTX is like a Uniswap. It's like a DEX, I should say, and essentially it's gonna eliminate like 80 to 90% gas fees.
I love
the
that.
Ethereum network. So it's gonna be fucking huge.
Very nice. Anybody else? Any other projects that have piqued anybody's interest? Or all right, so we got about 5 minutes left. So what I want to do is kind of set ourselves up good for next week. Again, these are meant to bring this information into a centralized location here, so for all of us are able to access it, and again, just this for us all to learn as well. So some of the Cellframe, Orchain, Constellation Network, those all sound really cool. So and again, I'm interested in Layer Zero as well. So with that said, why don't we throughout the week, like I said, even if it's an hour, try to do a little bit of looking into one of these protocols here and get some information and that we can build out some more information on these so that I can create maybe a quick document so that say, hey, cell frame, this is all the information on it, and we can start building that out for people to go into. So hey, I want to look at an infrastructure project. Well, here's cell frame. We've all kind of done the work and looked at it. This is what it's about. This is what they got coming up. So yeah, it doesn't matter which one you choose. I'd say go ahead and just pick one. If you're able to, if you have the bandwidth, I highly encourage it. Again, we're all kind of working together here. So, any other thoughts, questions, or feedback actually on the workshop itself? Because that's key too. Is this the direction that we want to take this, or do we want to take it in a different direction? And yeah,
You're a good public speaker. I'll give you that.
thanks, man. I appreciate it.
No problem, brother.
Any other thoughts? So how do people feel on the format of this workshop? I'm completely okay with continuing to be the lead form. But this is all of us. This is us working together. This is us doing this. So if you're not happy with something about it, even if you don't want to say it online, that's cool. You can shoot me a message offline or wait until we're done recording or whatever, and we can talk about it afterwards. But yeah, if you have any thoughts about how this is set up so far, again, right now, so next week, what I want to do is I want to actually dive a little bit more. If there's any new infrastructure news that comes out, we'll talk about that new infrastructure news. I'll keep my ear to the ground for that type of information, and I'll share that with you guys as well to kind of have that here at a consolidated location. So any news, and then we'll look at some of these projects, specifically these ones that I have in bold. And if there's any other ones here that you're really interested in, absolutely. I'm not going to tell you that you have to look at these, or if there's something that's not on this list and you decide that you want to look at that, absolutely. This is a open format, so we can all work together here and dive deep into these different projects. But we'll not saying we're just going to look at one project. We can look at several as we go through these weekly workshops.
No, that's great, man. I feel extremely lucky we have a professor, like a college teacher, leading these in such a new space where curriculums change every day.
Yes.
On this topic, I think we're extremely lucky to have, that structure and giving us like a jumping off point for all of us to consolidate our research. It's pretty awesome.
Good deal. All right. So with that said, I shared the link out. I don't know if I actually, let me not make this private. And yeah, so basically, anybody's going to have they'll be available. This document will be available to you. If you want to add something to it, this is an open document. Please, I'm not the. No. Anyway, I'll set that up later. But yeah, I'll share this out so that everybody can access this and edit it. Come in and if you have something that you want to add to it, if you have a question, type it into here. Maybe I'll even set up a little questions spot. So if something comes up in the week and you have a question about it, add it to the. I encourage you to add it to this list here. So that we can, throughout the week, if you think of something, just throw it on here. If you don't have the time to look it up, fine, throw it on this list. I'll monitor this, especially like the day before the workshop. I'll go through, look at the questions, and see if I can come up with see if we can come up with good answers and help everybody out, because that's the idea of this. We want to help everybody out here.
Awesome.
Yeah. Can you? Yeah. What is the organization here?
organization of this.
Sorry,
this,
I was a little distracted. Yeah. So where is that doc, and then where is everything?
Right now,
Okay,
the
so that was
doc
an
is-
event chat.
Yeah, it's just sitting in
Um,
event chat right now. There's not real. Again, I was just kind of typing stuff up as I was talking.
No, that's great. I'm just trying to be of help of where we could put it because the DeFi has a thread.
Yep.
I think if we just start a workshop channel and then have all the threads under that, or
That sounds pretty minty bunsy.
trying to think of how we could best organize our efforts. I know Az is updating the channel, and while everyone's in here, could we get honest feedback on the layout of the channel, the new look and text?
I fuck with it.
Anyone else?
I'm more of a simple, keep it simple.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit confusing to my eye.
Yeah,
Makes me have to like solve a puzzle.
a little bit. Yeah.
Anyone else? All right. Well, so the event chat. Does the document? I'll speak to Az, but I want to figure out the best way to organize these efforts. The DeFi with the thread, I think, is cool. If you want to drop that doc into that thread as well, the DeFi workshop. That way we have it in another spot, and next week we'll have. Would you guys want a channel with a thread under it, or just a workshop channel in general with threads under that?
I guess I'll speak for everyone.
Yeah.
Sean, I see you're unmuted. Come on, Sean, back me up.
Yeah, sorry guys. I'm just doing some like other work. I haven't been able to interact that much.
Trash you.
Let's see. What are the options again?
So the options is like kind of the layout as we're going with the. See, if you go down to Alphaverse, there's DeFi.